Hello, and welcome to another episode of Part in the Dust, Dusting Off Construction with Caitlin and Jillian. We're your hosts, Caitlin
and Jillian.
And today we're here dusting off Wavelogix with two guests, Henry Silva, co-founder and director of product development, and Joe Turek, president. So let's get to it. Henry and Joe, could you please introduce yourselves and Wavelogix?
Yeah, sure thing. Thank you for introducing me. My name is Henry Silva. I'm the director of product development of Wavelogix. And Joe?
And I am Joe Turek, the president of Wavelogix.
Yeah, you go. I was going to just make sure we get Wavelogix also introduced.
Yeah, exactly.
People know what Wavelogix is.
Yeah, Wavelogix is a smart infrastructure company with our innovative smart concrete sensor technology.
That's very interesting. You used the word smart a lot of times. What is smart infrastructure?
Yeah, sure thing. So smart infrastructure in general is really about using IoT, Internet of Things, distributed devices to collect data about everything on the job site, both during construction and after construction, so that we can use that to make data-driven decisions, accelerate our construction schedules, and make sure that our infrastructure is healthy long-term.
All right. So, Henry, you also said another buzzword. You said Internet of Things. Now, could you explain that to me like I'm 5 years old?
Yeah, sure thing. So the Internet of Things is simply bringing the internet to as many things as possible. So this could take things that we've normally seen as perhaps dumb or not connected to the internet. We can use an example from the construction site, like a concrete mixing truck. So back in the day, concrete mixing trucks would be dispatched from the ready mix plant, and they would make their way over to the job site. And they probably have to be on a radio or something like that to constantly update their location to make sure that the concrete would be delivered on time. But now we can install things that connect up to the internet, just like your phone, and the the concrete truck's position can be tracked in real time. So the ready mix company can take all of that data and optimize their business and reduce cost and deliver a better product to their customers. So using that principle and that idea and applying it to as many things really in the world.
That's cool. So it's almost creating like a web of information that everyone has access to so that everything runs as smoothly as possible.
Yeah, not only to make better decisions in real time, but look at things, snapshots of the past to really plan for the future and make things better.
That's great. That sounds like something that technology or that construction sites really need technologically.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. So obviously you have identified this need of connecting things. How exactly did Wavelogix come about? You're the co-founder. What was the need that you all saw there?
Yeah, so the story goes back to 2017, the Indiana Department of Transportation. They had a problem that a lot of other governing bodies and infrastructure have is we're making these roads. There are cracks. We need to patch them. Some people think of potholes, but in concrete, really, it's cracking. And we need to replace this damaged piece of road. And we want to do it quickly because the longer that we have it closed down, the more taxpayers get mad. And that can even impact the economy. Indiana is the crossroads of America, right? So we have a ton of trucks that go through it. And so closing down the road for a day or multiple days can have large impacts on the economy. So they wanted to know, when can we open the roads at the correct time? And if you open roads, if you didn't know, they usually close them overnight. And so they'll specify a certain period of time. They'll say, okay, we're going to have it closed for 8 hours. So it's going to be 8 hours to rip up the concrete, prepare the base, pour the new concrete, let it cure, and then finally open traffic. And so the problem with that prescription is that it may not be enough time to give the concrete to cure, because then you get early age damage if it's not strong enough. But also, if it's too much time, then that's time that taxpayers could be spending actually driving over it and getting the return on that investment. So INDOT approached Purdue University and Dr. Luna Liu, our founder and CEO, her lab, and said, hey, can you develop a technology that tells us when to open the roads? That's really how this entire thing started.
Yeah, I know when the roads are closed, it's no fun. So definitely maximizing the the ability for the roads to be open for everybody to get to where they need to be, but then also, giving the concrete enough time so it's not like a waste of time, waste of money of actually repairing the road.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so
Uh,
that's how the technology got to the lab. And so, do you want me to continue how that technology eventually made it out of the lab and into WaveLogix?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it spent, like I said, it started in 2017. It spent about 3 or 4 years in the lab. And in 2020, they published a paper that used a piezoelectric sensor, so which is basically a material that takes electricity in and then converts it to mechanical energy and vice versa. And they used that innovative sensor to actually put it on a concrete cylinder, which that's what they were using to brake to determine when to open the road. Hopefully, some people are familiar with that. I don't know if we'll go into that whole explanation. And when they would break it, they'd use the sensor to predict what the strength was, and they broke it, and they saw that it was extremely accurate. So after they published that paper and did those experiments, then they had that's when I came into the picture to work on the prototype to actually take that sensor from the lab and deploy it into the field. And after working on that for about a year, we had a pretty reliable prototype. We've tested around different parts in Indiana, and we recognized that this thing had a lot of market potential. So Dr. Liu made the decision to launch the company in 2021. And we started with just myself, Dr. Liu, and the at the time PhD student, now a PhD, Dr. Khan. So yeah, that's kind of how it all came together.
That's very cool. I know the other thing that we can all share with everybody is we were all just at the Precast Show down in Indianapolis, so INDOT. And we got to hear Dr. Luna Liu speak, which was really fantastic. And also just seeing all the data. I know Jillian was having a field day, just enjoying all the physics and the math. And I'm just like wowed by everything. And she's like understanding it all. But seeing all of that was really exciting. And just seeing everybody that was actually even in the audience and how excited they were about the technology and everything that you're doing to help simplify this was really, really fun. So, do you have anything else to share about Dr. Luna Liu's presentation that she gave at the Precast Show?
Yeah, I'll make a quick comment about the precast industry specifically. Was very happy to see how technology forward a lot of the people at the talk were. When we go to different industries, some are more receptive than others. That's definitely something that we noticed, especially with your guys' product and the other products there at the precast shows, that they're always looking to see how they can incorporate technology to optimize and save money.
Yeah, absolutely. It was really fun to see people asking all those questions. She's like doctorate level questions. I love this. But me not knowing as much about concrete as well as, of course, producers do, it was really great seeing everybody engaged with that conversation.
Yeah, and all the engineers there asking those fantastic questions. They all kind of furthered the conversation with us at our booth afterwards, which I think was really nice and refreshing just to see that level of engagement and excitement over new technology and new science in the concrete industry.
Yeah, and there was one woman that came up to our booth after that. I've known she just started her precast business with her family about 18 months ago. And so I met her about a year and a half ago, and she came over to our booth and was very excited about Wavelogix and was like, I would love to incorporate this into my plant, which is a very new plant. So that means that they're very forward thinking of adopting technology early on in their business so that they can be the best as, time grows, which is very exciting and very cool to see.
Absolutely.
So I did want to go back a little bit more back into precast. So how does WaveLogix and your technology benefit the precast industry? I know you've talked about it a little bit, but do you mind elaborating further?
Yeah, sure thing, Joe. I think you got this one.
Oh, okay.
Whatever you're doing.
Yeah,
I don't want to talk to
Joe.
you.
Yeah, wake up, Joe. Say something. Tell the audience you're still alive. Um, Yeah, it's really interesting. The precast market is really fascinating. I think there's two aspects in precast that are important regarding strength. One is to make sure the concrete has sufficient strength for the molds to be opened up, and then the product to be moved from the molding room, typically out into the yard. And then final strength, making sure that it's reached its specified cure strength to be able to be then sold to the customer and moved to the job site. And so those are two really important areas that to date, for 100-year technology, we've determined strength in concrete by pouring companion cylinders and then breaking them at periodic points. And then using that break point, the strength of the break point, then to make a decision of what to do. The problem is if you're looking for a specific strength, using a cylinder to break it is not specific. It's at a particular time, and if you didn't hit the strength you wanted, then you're going to have to wait another period of time to break another cylinder to then determine if you've exceeded the strength or if you've gotten to the strength that you need. So it's a pretty inefficient process. By using a Wavelogix sensor, you can actually see the strength build in real time. And so if you're making decisions to say, I want to release my mold at 500 PSI or 800 PSI or 3000 PSI, you can actually find the time when you hit that strength and then open your mold. So it's a way to optimize and make the whole process of molding and mold release much more efficient. The other problem is that when you're dealing with early strength, breaking cylinders is not an exact science because the cylinder itself hasn't had enough time to develop great maturity in strength and therefore may not give you accurate results in the crush. Yeah. And then, the other problem is that when you've opened your mold and you move your product out into a yard, if you've ever seen a yard full of precast materials, you've got product all over the place. And you're trying to identify when a particular product was made and what strength it is and how that relates back to the cylinders. It's a real task to try and figure that out. Now, part of the beauty, if I can go so far as to say like Idencia, by being able to potentially tag the precast parts and move them around and then tie in like our sensor data into your dashboard, it makes it very efficient for someone to identify where the part is located and the piece is located and also see what the strength is at that particular time. Again, final strength may take anywhere from 7 to 28 days to get final strength. And if you have to rely on cylinder breaking, again, it's pretty inefficient. But if you can see you've reached your final strength, you could validate that with a cylinder break at that time, and then that product is ready to ship out the door. And we've seen opportunities of increasing the speed to shipment by as much as 2 weeks sometimes, when you can actually see the real-time strength being developed.
Very cool. Yeah, and I can imagine like obviously concrete breaks, once the cylinder's broken, it's broken. You can't re-break it. But your sensors, you could always, review the data again at any time. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. The data is stored, virtually forever. It's in the cloud. It's accessible anywhere. So again, if you've been involved with cylinder breaking, the cylinders typically have to be kept in a lab, and then someone has to take that cylinder and then actually break it. And if you wanted to learn your strength in the middle of the night, well, you're going to have to wait till the next day when the crew comes in to be able to break it. So, yeah, whereas with our sensor technology, and again, as Henry had indicated, Internet of Things, our sensors are connected to the internet. And so you're able to see real-time strength anywhere on the planet that has internet connection at any time of day or night. So it becomes much more convenient to have an IoT type of sensor device giving you information, and specifically with regard to strength.
Yeah, and I know from my experience going to precast producer plants that the cylinder break room is kind of like the room of shame in a way, where it's just like the dark and dungy basement with no windows and just machines and concrete cylinders that people break. And nobody loves to be stuck in that room doing all of those concrete cylinder breaks.
For sure not. And Nobody likes to miss a deadline either. Joe, you mentioned that sometimes you can ship up to 2 weeks early. And I know that especially when you get into the pre-stressed and the hollow core pieces with all of these super custom, super intricate engineered designs, delays happen. And so being able to ship 2 weeks before an estimated strength would have been reached otherwise is really beneficial, especially for that just-in-time delivery and all those custom pieces. So that's really
Yeah.
great as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a huge improvement in efficiency.
And I know one of the other topics we wanted to cover today too is just one of our main focuses of our podcast too is to give just voices to younger generations entering these types of roles and these types of industries. So Henry, we know that you're recently graduated, and now you're a co-founder of a company, which is pretty great. Um, so can you tell us about your experience with being a co-founder of Wavelogix?
Yeah, sure thing. Quick correction: my graduation's
Yeah,
pending.
forgot. Yep.
We'll see when we get to that. But yeah, definitely being younger and coming into this industry has been quite the experience. So I didn't have a construction background. I knew almost nothing about the concrete industry. I didn't even know what the difference between cement and concrete was.
And now you know.
And since then, and now I do know. Yes, I'm confident in that, among other things. But our expectations at the beginning as a team, but also myself especially, were completely different to what actually happened. We thought things would uh, take not that much time. They've taken much longer, and they've been a lot more difficult. But one of the beautiful things being a co-founder, being here with the technology from even before the company in the lab, it's really been a growing experience as the company has grown. So I've grown along with the company. Started out very technical, and I think a lot of co-founders, a lot of founders are that way. They start out in the very technical side, and then as teams get bigger, things have to move faster. Money's coming in. People have to take a leadership role. So it's been a fantastic experience to kind of keep trying new things and growing my responsibility as Wavelogix has done more and more. So yeah, that's been the best thing as a co-founder to kind of go through that whole experience.
And what's it like working with Lulu?
Yeah, it's increasingly interesting is the phrase that I would use. If you didn't know, she had quite a meteoric rise at Purdue. I think she was the youngest tenure track professor, Joe. I think that's correct, right?
Yeah, I
At
think
the
so.
university. Yeah. So when she came here, youngest tenure track professor, and then in the past 3 years, she's actually had three promotions. So
Wow.
in addition to being the founder CEO of Wavelogix, she's maintained her professorship at Purdue, but that has grown as well. So she was I think she was the dean, and then the assistant dean of faculty for the College of Engineering, and then now she's the vice president of industry partnerships for Purdue. And Purdue being, I would say, the best engineering school in the country, that's quite a big responsibility. So, uh, going through and talking about the company with her, that's always been evolving from really on the technical side in the lab, and now it's to the business side, a learning experience for both of us. But with her changing positions at Purdue, the conversations with her about that, because I'm interested in how Purdue can impact the students, it's always been um, an evolving thing. So she's constantly evolving, kind of excited to see what's next.
Very cool. Yeah, I was gonna ask next, like how do you guys like interact with the current student body? Like, how do you guys try to work with them still and get them involved with Wavelogix?
Yeah, something that Purdue is really big on, and WaveLogix is really big on. Definitely a mutually beneficial relationship there. We have, as a startup, a lot of things flying around, a lot of projects that can be worked on, and any additional manpower is definitely appreciated. So I remember the first chance, like the first iota of possibility to get interns, I jumped on it. I said, "Okay, we're getting interns." And luckily, Purdue has a interns for Indiana program where any Indiana-based company can get basically a grant to um, hire interns for that summer. So we were fortunate enough to receive two. The first summer that we participated, that was 2 summers ago, and I didn't know what to expect when working with the students. It was very funny. I gave them a project that was way over ambitious, way too many things that were new for them. But they took it in stride, and they actually had a somewhat functional prototype by the end. And using those lessons learned, did interns again last summer and had a fantastic experience with two of them. Both of them had great projects, and they got to have a complete solution by the end. And that has also developed into a part-time relationship with both of those students. So it's been really great giving people the opportunity to learn new things and kind of showcase their ability. Because when working with students, I found it's really about them. It's an investment in them. Like they are providing WaveLogix and the other companies that they'll work for in the future a service, but there's so many great things that we can do for them. I think I said to my second group of interns, like, this is really for you guys. I want you guys to not work here next summer because I want you to go on to a different company. And yeah, so it's been a really great experience.
It's really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, also being in the product space, Henry, I feel like I have a bit of an insight as to what I enjoy about product development. But what's your favorite part of doing product development? Is it working with those interns, or is it the science behind it all? What motivates you to keep going?
Yeah, it really, I think my love is in the technology and in the development itself. But what I like most is the people, because the people make the product, and it's both on my side, my team, but also the customers. I think that's where you see the most growth. So from our side, it's kind of challenging my team and working with them to craft this product, because you can do so much more than with a team than with yourself. So it's really a beautiful thing when everyone can understand the industry. And once again, the people that are on my engineering team, they are not familiar with the construction, with the concrete industry. And so working with them to make them more independent and better engineers and better product developers over time has really been awesome. And then on the customer side, those are the people that really make you grow. If your product sucks, they'll tell you. And so, yeah, they're honest. And so, getting on calls with customers and things going wrong, they're saying, "Hey, like we paid for this," because stuff always goes wrong, and it's like, "Yeah, we'll work on it to get the solution, but also maintain that relationship." Right? It's not just about the product; it's also with the relationship with the customer. So that's been where I've grown the most, is when interacting with the customers. And although sometimes it can be frustrating, it is really critical to get that customer feedback and listen to the customer, because a lot of times what you think or your team thinks is the best thing is not what the customer wants. So, yeah, it's really the people in product development that make it great.
Yeah, that's awesome. I definitely find, especially with Idencia and leading our product, that it is also our customers that are really driving the innovation and making us want to be the best version of both ourselves as a team and as a product as well. So I'm glad that that resonates with you as well.
And Joe, I wanted to ask you, what brought you to WaveLogix?
Uh, it was kind of by accident. My
Isn't that
as
the
a
best
lot
way
of
to
things
start a
are.
story?
I know, isn't that right? Yeah. We um I was brought in on a consulting role originally. And the product was just getting finished, ready to come out of the lab. And now they wanted to develop the product for full scale manufacturing and introduction and be hardened enough to be sold to the general public. My background is electrical engineering. I'm a professional engineer in double E, and like Henry, never had any involvement with civil engineering, concrete manufacturing, construction, other than being delayed on the expressway multiple times, sitting there watching them build a road next to me, right? Which
Yeah.
is, yeah, now I get to see it from the inside, and I have a lot more respect for the delays that go on, and how important safety is in critical aspects of it. But um, I was, most of my career was working in both startups and building electronic uh, product for for production. And so I had a lot of experience with manufacturing, product development, and design, and introduction to the marketplace. So brought in as consultant, worked as a year with consulting, and then Luna uh, had asked me then to run the company and see if we can grow the product. And so I took over from there, started with Henry and Dr. Kong, and together we built up the team, developed the product, made it hardened for um, the the outside world. We went through 6 to 8 months of testing out in the field, learned a lot of things as you do when you do field testing in the real world. Came back to the drawing board and hardened our product, and then came out with our current version that we have been selling for over a year now into the marketplace. And develop the sales team then from there once you have a product. And we're just continuing to grow the company. And it's a lot of fun, fits my skill set, and it only works if you have a great team behind you, right? All I can really do is be the coach on the sidelines, and then everybody else makes the plays. And that's kind of a business. So
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Could you tell us more? I know Henry at the show had that neat cylinder. I don't know what to call it. You guys
We
tell me what
call
to
it
call
the
it.
cylinder sensor kit.
Yeah, tell
Yeah.
us more about the cylinder sensor kit. Sounds very fancy.
Yeah, it's I think a great addition to our product line. We make the general sensors that are perfect for bearing in concrete. And that's, how the sensor was designed. You typically put it in a structure, and then you have a cable that comes out and it connects up to what we call the data logger. The data logger is what excites the sensor, collects the data, sends it up to the web via a cellular connection, has a battery in it, and what is the operational element of our whole sensor system. Um, but there are times when it doesn't make sense to necessarily put a sensor in a structure. And when you start looking at the precast world, if you're casting up 10 or 20 products, let's say, and you're using the same mix design, you could be relatively certain that everything is going to cure at the same rate, basically. If you had to put a sensor in each one of the products, sometimes it gets a little cumbersome, and expensive. And you can put one sensor in one product, but then you also have the element that you're moving it around the yard. There's a lot of movement, and having a cable and a data logger attached to a part that you're moving around sometimes works well, but may not work the best. So just like the companion cylinders that you make that you actually crush, we created the cylinder sensor where we put a sensor in the bottom of a 6-inch by 12-inch cylinder. And it's very convenient for in operations and production for you just to dump about 6 inches of concrete into that cylinder sensor, bearing the sensor, hanging a data logger on the outside of the cylinder, and then you can move that cylinder to the lab, or you can keep it out in the yard, and it's going to be representative of the curing of all the parts that you made in that batch, which is really convenient. And like I think either Caitlin or Jillian, you made the comment you've seen the cylinder rooms at yards. They are a mess, right?
Yeah.
When you talk about pardoning your dust, I mean they're a kind of a crazy environment because you've got concrete dust all over the place while you're cracking these cylinders. You're creating a lot of waste because every one of those cylinders that you crack then has to be disposed of.
Yeah.
Uh,
Mhm.
so if you could imagine all those cylinders in a room being replaced by our cylinder sensor, one cylinder represents about 15 cylinders that you would crush. So our cylinder sensor kit is like a 1 to 15 ratio or 1 to 10 ratio. So you really optimize the space that you have in the lab, and you don't have to do anything. You don't have to crush it. It's dust free, and the data logger is just sending data up to the cloud. And so we've seen this specifically in the precast industry as a great way of optimizing the whole process. Every time we make a batch of concrete, dump some of that concrete into the cylinder sensor, and then put that off to the side. And for batch by batch that you identify with a tag, you can be looking at the real time strength of that batch of concrete.
Yeah, absolutely. And then precasters can pour more product because now they're not pouring cylinders.
Right, exactly. Yep, it's
So
real efficient. You're
it's a
not tripping
win-win.
over them and moving them. Yeah, it's a. I don't think I've ever met anyone who loves breaking cylinders. It's just a nightmare doing that. So this is a
Yeah.
great optimized way of doing it.
So, Joe, I want to go back to something you mentioned a little while ago about appreciating the delays because of all the safety and regulations that they have to follow. So, there's a standard here that I'm reading on my page that I don't want to misrepresent, but the AASHTO T-412 standard. Can you tell us a little bit more about the regulations and how they're evolving with Wavelogix as well as that standard in particular? Because I know that's an important one for our listeners.
Yeah, it's the acronym is typically pronounced AASHTO. It's the
Sure.
AASHTO standard. Yeah, that's okay. And the Department of Transportation across the country, all of their specifications revolve around AASHTO specifications. So it's unique to the DOTs, and for them to actually have a specification to do something, it has to be approved by all 50 states as a process or a test or whatever. Our sensor, the WaveLogix Rebel, was able to get a test specification last year in July. It was the T412 specification that approves acoustical resonant sensors to be used for measuring strength in real time. That's compared to cylinder breaks and to typically maturity sensors. And I'll just mention maturity sensors have been a real time strength measuring device that is just based on using temperature of the concrete, of the exothermic reaction when water and cement mix. And you relate the rise in temperature to a cylinder that you've broken to calibrate it, to then say at a particular temperature, I can say the strength is X. Problem with concrete is that the temperature signature starts to cool off after about 24 hours. And so everything after that just becomes kind of an estimate. That could be varied by environmental conditions. If it's too hot, too cold, it could be throwing off your sensor readings. So we at WaveLogix do not believe that maturity sensors are the best method out there to measure strength in the real world due to environmental concerns. It can't determine if the specification is off, if there was too much water or too little water in the mix. It doesn't pick those things up. Whereas the acoustical method looks at the true strength of the material by determining the modulus of the material, and that is what represents the strength. And it is independent of the mix design, no matter what combination of aggregate sand, water, cement, and additives that you put in. The sensor is independent to all those things. It'll pick up the true strength, which makes it really convenient because you don't have to go through a calibration process, which again is time consuming and wasteful and expensive. So our AASHTO standard is the first step in allowing the DOTs and contractors to use our process and our sensor in a DOT project. Now it gets a little bit more complicated from that, and kind of a chicken and an egg. You can't. Each state by state, writes their own true test specifications in their state for how a contractor is going to perform work for the state.
Sure.
The state can only adopt standards that have been approved by all 50 states. So it has to be an AASHTO standard, but they don't necessarily have to adopt a standard that has been approved by all 50 states. So we have, even though we have an AASHTO standard, we have to get each state to adopt our standard into their state test specifications. And so we are now in the process of working with each state. We've got 35 states that we've identified. We're working with 10 very closely that are hopeful that within this year they'll adopt our specification into their test specs. Massachusetts was the first state to actually adopt the T412 into their specs. We're working closely, of course, with Indiana Texas, Missouri, Iowa, Kansas, Florida, California, Colorado, Georgia, across the country, Michigan, um, uh, uh, in various states. So a lot of people are working on this, and that's what we hope, that we can get the states to adopt. It's also a chicken and egg for a state to adopt a specification. They want to make sure that the contractors are happy with them applying, adding something to
Of
the spec.
course.
So they want the contractors to be using it. And the contractors are like, well, if there isn't a test spec, why should I use it? Right. So we're trying to show the benefits to the contractors of how they can utilize it for early and late strength, even if they still have to use cylinders to do the final strength and meet the
Yeah,
specifications until the state adopts it.
that makes
Um,
sense.
yeah, so that's where we are with that. Now, of course, there's DOT is just a small, s- you know, uh, part of all the concrete work that's done in the world today.
Right, of course.
So when you talk about like tilt-up panels or work in construction, a lot of it are not DOT specified. But if you're talking about bridge beams and columns and other culverts and things that are on DOT project, then they have to meet a DOT specification state by state.
Yeah, it's definitely cool that you've been able to take this step. I feel like getting it in all of these big long letters, and having a number associated with a stamp of approval from such a high regulatory standpoint is definitely a great indicator that it provides value to the individual and not just the DOT or DOT related work even.
Yeah, and the work we had to do to get the spec, it's not like you just call it the DOT and say, "Hey, would you write a spec for this?" We
Of
had to go
course.
out and do field trials with 10 states, exhaustive testing that they had to sign off on, and then once they understood it and used it, then they had to write the spec, and those 10 states had to, um, convince the rest of the states, the rest of the 40 states, that this was a viable product and it should be included as a test specification. So there was a lot of work behind the scenes just to get the test spec. But then unfortunately, once you do that, then each state has to readopt it and rewrite or add it to their test specification for that state.
Yeah. And I do want to go change topics a little bit, but kind of go back to something you were talking about earlier, Joe. You mentioned, well, I guess I'll just ask the question, talk about it further. So, why are Wavelogix and Idencia partnering? Of course, Julie and I are from Idencia, so we know. You are from a Wavelogix, so you know, but our audience doesn't know as much. So, you touched on it earlier, but do you care to elaborate further on our partnership?
Yeah, I mean, we're really excited. I mean, as we're just kind of getting started. And I got to hand it to your your management to identify WaveLogix. You came to us. We didn't actually come to you. We didn't even know about Idencia, but when you told us what you were doing, it made so much sense to us that if you're tracking an asset, and I use the term asset as any type of part that you've, let's say precast, and
Yeah.
you're moving it around. There's a lot of movement of those parts around a yard. And you can imagine when you're in the factory environment, you're casting parts all day long. And then once you got them cast, you got to get them out into the yard to final
Hmm.
cure. They start piling up, right? And then you have parts that are getting shipped out the door and moved to the site. And then you open up more space and you're putting new product there. And then you look out a yard and you have no idea what the strength is of any of that product out there, much less, trying to identify it, right? Like when was it made? What was the batch where it's located? So using an Idencia system first to track that asset, to know where it's at, is really huge. So someone says, "Hey, listen, I did this batch and I want, where can I find it?" Because it was timely because you first in, first out, the first ones that you cast, you want to make sure that the first ones that are shipped.
Yep,
But
absolutely.
but as I had mentioned, you really can't ship that product until you know that you've reached final strength for
Yeah.
certification. And so, you know, even though you can identify the asset where it's at, you really want to know what the strength is of that asset, right? And say, okay, I know we've hit final strength, and then where I can do it. And so Idencia has created a beautiful dashboard that can locate and tell you where your assets are at. But if you can add in strength into that information and any other types of sensor information that somebody wants, you can put it into a single spot in a dashboard. Then a user has one spot where they can get all their information. They don't have to go to 50 other places to try and pull it all in together.
Mhm.
So, if they just used our dashboard and looked at the strength of a product, you could say, oh, that product reached the strength, but where is it?
Yeah, exactly.
Like
Exactly.
I don't know where it is. So having a tie into an Idencia dashboard and know that where a product is and what strength it's at, I think is just a brilliant combination. And so I give your management team and Jeff high marks for identifying, hey, we really could use some strength, and also identifying the best strength product on the market with Wavelogix. So
Absolutely.
we're really excited about the aspects of partnering up with you guys.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, and for those of you listening, if you've been listening to our podcast, you know exactly who Jeff is. But if you're new here for this episode, Jeff is the CEO of Idencia. He just had our 10-year anniversary. If you wanted to listen to that episode, which is our previous one, but he is a very proud alum of Purdue. So he loves all things Purdue and all things that come out of Purdue, but especially Wavelogix caught his attention, and seeing the keywords there of sensors and maturity testing and
Internet of Things.
internet
Smart
things,
infrastructure.
smart infrastructure,
All the things that we're all about.
absolutely. So it goes along with our mission and our values, as well as a company of trying to bring the very best to our customers and delight them as much as possible, and to drive that innovation in the industry overall. Which I think is the next thing I want to jump to is, obviously we've talked a lot about how this is helping today and increasing and improving standards for DOTs and other people today. But how do we see this? And Henry, if you wanted to jump in on this as well, how do you see this innovation really pushing forward in the industry and driving even the next steps after the one we're on right now?
Yeah, sure thing. So you're totally right that our initial focus is on this short term. How do we provide value for people doing construction in to accelerate their schedules and reduce costs? But looking at the long term trajectory of the entire industry, one of the big things is it has to be green, reducing the carbon footprint, and a lot of that has to do with the mixed design. So cement, a big component or the key component in concrete that holds everything together. There's a few different paths that we can go in terms of reducing its carbon footprint, because it is the most carbon intensive ingredient in concrete. So by utilizing technologies that are able to not only take the data but store it all in one place, just to go back to some stuff that we've seen, you may have a DOT engineer that knows the past 50 years of concrete that has been used, let's say in the state of Oklahoma or the state of Texas. And then when that guy retires, all that data is lost. It's in some notebook or collection of notebooks that just gets thrown in the trash. And so by having these technologies similar to Idencia and Wavelogix and other stuff in the industry that saves that data long term, we can look at our infrastructure, look at our concrete specifically, the mixed designs, and say, okay, it's working like this. It's worked like this over the past 10 years. How can we further optimize this? Because construction, rightly so, is a very conservative industry. And so if we're not collecting that data, if we don't have the right data points and the right tools to analyze that data, we can't make those decisions to make sure that our infrastructure is still safe. And we kind of rely upon the traditional, conventional means of building our infrastructure. So it's really about getting all the data, storing it long term, analyzing it, and having the right technologies in place that get those data points. So, yeah, it's about green, but there's a lot of other stuff that can be optimized.
And just generally, of course, every industry is going towards green, but construction definitely, and anybody that can be, continuing the forefront of doing more things that are more sustainable and helping the industry grow in the more sustainable way is really important. And I'm really excited for us, both as companies, that's our missions and what we're working towards.
Yeah, and I also wanted to add that although I personally agree that going green is super useful, I know that there's a lot of controversy around that. And so being able to add benefit to back into the pockets of these people who are helping us go green coincidentally by adapting these new technologies, I think is also great when there's a financial gain, as well as a community gain from going green and adopting these technologies. Yeah.
And I think those are all the questions that I have. Jillian, do you have any other questions?
I do not have any other questions.
Henry and Joe, are there anything else that you want to leave the audience with that you want to share?
Henry, I'll let you go first.
Uh, yeah, I think the one thing I'd like to share is that there's a lot of places left for innovation in construction. I saw another person that's making these like smart measuring tapes. They're very cool. And he said that every time he sees a spreadsheet on a job site, there's an opportunity. So we shouldn't be afraid to innovate in the construction industry, even though there's definitely some risk involved, especially compared to other industries, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of money. But it's definitely the path towards the future, and there's a lot of opportunity still left.
Yeah,
Those
that's
are
that's
very
so
wise
true.
words.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, for sure. And I'd just like to add that um, being involved with the construction industry for a short period of time, it is amazing. It's one of the most innovative industries that I have worked in, and that's really encouraging. We're excited about bringing a new technology to the marketplace that hasn't existed before. And it's all about awareness of our product and people trying it. And so we're really trying to get the word out. So we appreciate podcasts like your program, uh, and at the same time, trying to get our products in people's hands to give it a whirl. We have a great product offering. Product can ship within a day of being ordered. We also have some test kits where you can try out our product for free and get to know it. And the more that people use it and can build up a community, the stronger our product will be, and the construction industry will benefit from that.
Awesome. I know that actually spurred like I got a bunch of questions that came to my mind as I told you guys I was done asking questions. So I have a couple small little things I'm just gonna touch on and ask. You mentioned test kits. That's super cool. Let's make sure that we get links or information that I can add to the description for our listeners if they're interested in going about that route. And secondly, you mentioned actually, maybe you didn't mention, but it brought back to my mind. I know you guys do a webinar, and I know that we're actually going to be guests on your next webinar, and we're very excited. That's going to come up in March, so I want to make sure all of our listeners are aware of that, and I also want to make sure our listeners know what your webinar is about. I hear it's on a monthly basis, and what can they learn if they tune into your webinars?
Yeah, that's great. Last quarter, we had a series of 6 webinars that were informational, and anyone could go onto our website and just review those if they'd like. We talked about how our product can be used in different industries, and what its benefits were. So they were kind of fun. Our webinars are half an hour long, so they're relatively short. We call them lunch and learns, where you don't have to spend a lot of time, but you get some good information out of it. Um, this quarter series are more interactive. So, like a podcast with video, we'll get to see both you, Caitlin, and Jillian, and we're going to just do an interactive, like you're doing here on a podcast. We get to ask questions. We get to learn more. This time, less about Wavelogix and more about Indencia
Oh
and
boy.
how your product works. So, yeah. So
We're on the other end.
exactly right. So the tables will be turned, and Henry and I will be able to ask the questions this time. So it should be a lot of fun, and we're looking forward to this series over this quarter.
Very cool.
That's
And my last final question, as I mentioned, we were all at the Precast Show. What was each of your favorite things about the Precast Show when you had gone?
Mine was the water filter, so that wasn't that. And I was very interested in that,
Oh,
but
yes.
maybe I won't talk about that one because that was not very related. Uh, I'm gonna need a second to think, John. I was kind of enamored by the water. Oh, okay. You know what? I got it. I got it. So it was it's very interesting seeing the different rebar tying solutions. I'm a big fan of hand tools because I think it's very
Mhm.
interesting from a product development perspective, and they're also cool to own. But there were several different types of rebar tying tools which interested me, and one of them I forget the company's name. I won't plug them, but it was this plastic one that snapped in, and this guy, another younger engineer, had made this machine. It was kind of like this apparatus. It was all mechanical that automated the snapping in process of those ties, so you didn't have to do it by hand with their hand tool. And that was super interesting. Also, hearing that guy's story of working at a number of different companies and then finding himself in the precast industry, specifically in the rebar space, was very cool.
Yeah, and Henry, to make you feel a little better, last year, not this year, but last year, Caitlin and I were at the water filtration booth for a very long time. It is a very enamoring thing to look at.
Yeah, that's great. And my favorite takeaway from the show was this really cool technology of asset tracking parts from a company I can't remember. I think it was called Idencia.
So you say, this sounds like what we do. Very awesome. Yeah, I always love going. Just all the people are always great. Everybody, it's fun being in the industry for a few years now because I go and I recognize people and I'm like, do I know you or do I just recognize you? Which is always very fun, and get to catch up with a lot of people at the Precast Show that I only see sparingly. So I enjoy it.
Yeah, and my favorite part is always connecting with our partners like Wavelogix, but also some of our other partners that have been on the show before, who just seeing their face instead of picturing them as a little icon in my email inbox always remotivates me and gets me more excited about doing these great technological things that we're doing, both individually and together.
And I mean, we're both short, so I mean, everybody's taller than us, but it's also good to be like, oh, you're taller than me. We're not the same height at computer level. But yeah, so I guess once again, thank you, Henry and Joe, for being here today and speaking with us about Wavelogix and our upcoming, or pretty much our partnership / upcoming partnership, full integration, ideally in the future. Very excited to see everything that we do all together. And thank you, listeners, today. Make sure you like and subscribe to the podcast to get notified when our latest episode releases. We should be pretty regular again this year, once a month. Very excited. And if you've listened to a few episodes and have enjoyed them, please be sure to rate us or leave us a comment to let us know what you'd like to hear about or what we can improve. I know when we were at the booth this year at the Precast Show, so many people came over. Either they were already fans, so thank you everybody who came over and said hi to us and got to meet us in person and take one of our buttons. We had buttons at the show. That was really cool and exciting to see our podcast really becoming like a real thing and people being like, oh, I loved this episode. Or like, you've listened. I know people listen because I see everybody's downloads. So I know there are people listening. So I really appreciate it. I know Jillian really appreciates it. It's been really fun to do. So yeah, so also make sure you share. And yeah, sharing is caring. And we make this content for you. So thank you.